Shalom Havreim, James Trim here, and today I want to talk to you about the Western type of text and why the Western type of text of the major text types of the New Testament is a major key to the original Hebrew and Aramaic, the Hebrew and Aramaic origin of the New Testament. So before I get going, I need to ask everybody to please donate to support this work. You can do that by sending donations by PayPal to donations@wnae.org. That's donations@wnae.org. You can also donate by clicking on the donate link in the video description. Now, somebody asked in the comments to the last video if there's any other way to donate besides PayPal. And unfortunately, I can't answer that in comments very well because YouTube tends to censor out any comments or replies to comments that contain links. So if I reply with a link, it just deletes the message and you don't ever see it. So I want to say I'm going to add to the page that the donate button or the donate link takes to you soon a way to donate by Zelle. We haven't quite got it set up yet, but it will be soon. So keep an eye on that, and you'll be able to donate by Zelle soon. All right. Also want to ask everybody to please like this video, share these videos with your friends on relevant Facebook groups, on your personal Facebook page, and other social media. Email them to your friends. Also subscribe to this video. It's absolutely free to subscribe. And click on that notification bell so you'll get notified when new videos come out. All of these things are things that the YouTube algorithm looks at to decide which videos to recommend to new viewers, and we want to get recommended to new viewers. We want to build our audience, so please help us out with all that. Also, another thing that helps with that algorithm is to leave comments. Let us know what you think in the comments section. Participate in the discussions in the comments section, and all those things help us out. All right, I want to tell you also that not only can you donate by clicking on the donate link in the video description, there are handouts for this video. In this particular, many times we have handouts for the videos, and as is normally the case, we have a link to a PDF file of the video handouts in the video description. In this rare instance, we actually have two sets of handouts, so there'll be two different links in the video description. So our first set of handouts, the first page, is, and it says 2 at the top because I actually extracted this from a book I wrote called The Hebrew and Aramaic Origin of the New Testament. And this is from chapter 2, The Primacy of the Western Text Type. So to give a little background information, no two Greek manuscripts of the New Testament agree exactly. They all have some little variance in them. In fact, this is a copy of the Nestle Aland text of the New Testament, and you'll see down here on the bottom of the page all these little footnotes indicating alternate readings from various manuscripts. So no two of these New Testament manuscripts agree exactly. They fall into 3 major categories, or text types, where the variants kind of coalesce, and these text types are kind of the DNA of New Testament manuscripts as they pass through the hands of various scribes over the centuries. So the 3 major text types are the Alexandrian, the Western, and the Byzantine type. The two oldest are the Alexandrian text type and the Western text type. And the later text type is the Byzantine text type that kind of developed later on. Okay, the Byzantine type text, which is the later type of text, is the basis for something called the Textus Receptus, which became the basis for the King James Version. It's also the effectively the basis for the so-called majority text, because the majority of manuscripts are later, right? I mean, if you go to figure out what kind of cars are on the road, well, the majority of cars will be more recent models, and there will be a handful of cars from the 1950s, for example. And that's the case with manuscripts. So there is a school of thought that says that we should go with the majority, like they're voting. But the problem is going with the majority is that the majority of manuscripts are late. The other school of thought that's common in Greek New Testament criticism is favoring the Alexandrian text, because some of the oldest manuscripts are Alexandrian. However, some of the oldest manuscripts are of the Western text type as well, and the Western text type has some important things going for it, as we will find in this study. So looking at our handout, and I'm going to skip the first couple of pages here of the first handout because I've kind of already covered a lot of the information just now. And the main thing that we want to get to there is that the Western text type is one of the oldest types of texts. And some of the oldest manuscripts or fragments of manuscripts are of the Western text type. Then we have citations by church fathers on page 3, actually, of your handout. And of your first handout, which is titled the Western Text. Or Western 2, I think is the file name. So whenever the earliest church fathers quoted the New Testament books, their quotations agreed with the Western text type. This is true of Justin, Irenaeus, Tertullian, Cyprian, and Hippolytus. Also, when Tatian compiled his gospel harmony, known as the Diatessaron, he used a Western type of text. Moreover, the Syriac church fathers, such as Euphrates and Ephraim, also quoted a Western type of text. However, the Greek church fathers of Alexandria, Clement of Alexandria and Origen, they often quoted from an Alexandrian type of text. And both of these men, of course, resided in Alexandria, Egypt, which is why it's called the Alexandrian text type. The Western text type is called the Western text type because of the fact that it was quoted often by Western church fathers, i.e. Latin church fathers and Western, not just Latin, but Western church fathers. Okay, let's go on now to earliest versions. The earliest versions of the New Testament, earliest language versions of the New Testament, were of the Western text type. So the earliest Latin version, for example, is the Old Latin. And you can imagine that there was a need for a Latin version very early on, with Latin being the lingua franca of most of the Roman Empire. And there was the Old Syriac is also the oldest Syriac version, or the oldest Aramaic version, is also a Western type of text. In fact, the Western text type used to be called the Syro-Latin type of text, for the very reason that the Old Latin, it was expressed in the Old Latin and Old Syriac versions. Also, the Armenian and the Georgian translations are of the Western text type. These are ancient translations. There's two major Latin versions of the New Testament, the Old Latin and the Latin Vulgate. The Latin Vulgate was produced in the 4th century by the church father Jerome, and it's generally accepted that his Latin Vulgate is actually a revision and standardization of the Old Latin, and so it tends to swing Western as well. Okay, the Old Latin version has a close relationship to the Greek of a manuscript, an ancient codex called Codex D. So Codex D and the Old Syriac and the Old Latin all are singing very much a similar song. Not exactly the same song, there's variants among them. But compared to the other texts, they're all singing the Western text song. This is important because in our previous videos on the Old Syriac and the Peshitta, we made a very clear case that the Peshitta is a revision of the Old Syriac towards closer to the Byzantine, which is a later text type. And so the Old Syriac is this a member of this old ancient Western text type that predated the Byzantine text type. Okay, we're not going to cover everything here in the handouts. You can skip on. You certainly are encouraged to read and study the full material. But if we skip on to page 5, it says there are internal examples of the Aramaic origin of the Old Latin. For example, in the Old Syriac, in Luke chapter 7, verse 28, we have Yochanan. And in the Greek, it's Yoanan, or Yoanu. And then in the Old Latin, it is Yohanan again. Okay. Another example is in Luke 18:14, where it says, one went down to his house justified more than, literally more from, that one. Now that's very good Aramaic grammar and Hebrew grammar, and I will just say, as I've said many times before, when I talk about Aramaic, as far as New Testament origins, it should be understood that in most cases, the same arguments exist for Hebrew, because Hebrew and Aramaic grammar are very, very similar, and they share much of the same vocabulary, and they're written with the same 22 letter script, the same 22 Hebrew letters. Now, Aramaic can be written with a cursive script as well, but it's still the same 22 letters as the Hebrew alphabet. So Luke 18:14, when it says one went down to his house justified more than that one, it's literally more from that one. And in the Old Syriac, the preposition is min, which is from. The Greek has more than, but the Old Latin has more from, okay, which is a literal translation of the, it's ab ilo in Latin. It's a literal translation of the Aramaic that we see in the Old Syriac. In Luke, sorry, I lost my place here. Okay, on our next page of our handout, page 6, Luke 24:21, where we read, and we were hoping. The Old Syriac agrees, the Old Syriac agrees with the Old Latin against the Greek. The Old Latin has a verb puta bamus. It could only have been translated from the ambiguous Aramaic verb, for it had been translated from the Greek verb, then it certainly would have used a Latin verb here that's different. So again, we have clear evidence that the Old Latin is expressing an Aramaic rather than Greek original. John chapter 1 verse 13, where it says the one was born. The singular relative in the Old Latin is almost certainly the result of a singular verb that we see in the Old Syriac. By the way, I'll just also say here, and we covered this, I think, but we may have to cover it some in the future. There are several connections between the Western type of text and the Gospel according to the Hebrews, which is the Gospel according to the Hebrews is a lost apocryphal text that was used by the ancient Nazarenes. Okay, we make the case in another video that it was the source text for our three synoptic Gospels. Okay, the geographic distribution. Another fact that points to the originality of the Western type of text in general is its early widespread distribution. Even though we call it the Western type of text, it was used in the earliest centuries in Europe and Africa, i.e. the Old Latin, in Egypt, even though it had a strong competitor in the Alexandrian type in Egypt, in Syria and Assyria, in Eastern Europe, the Armenian and Georgian versions, and the early centuries, the only version was the Alexandrian version. The only other version existed only in Greek, which was restricted to the area of Alexandria. Now, here's what I think happened, and we'll see this case move forward as supported in this study. I believe that the Western type of text was the first Greek text translated from the original Hebrew and Aramaic. Hebrew and or Aramaic, we'll say. As expressed in the Old Latin, and as we pointed out in our previous studies, the Dutile Hebrew version of Matthew is also follows the Western type of text in many regards. Has a very close relationship to the Old Syriac. All right, let's now talk about the probably the most important thing about the Western type of text. Its Semitic character. That's why I was saying that the Western type of text, the Greek Western text like we see in Codex D, in Farrar 13, etc., express a Greek text that was translated very literally from a Hebrew and or Aramaic original. And then that Hebrew and Aramaic grammar in a Greek text was just so awkward to Greek speakers that in Alexandria, where they were very refined in Greek, it was just too awkward for them, and they revised it and created their own revision that smoothed it out into nice, smooth, pretty Greek. And then over time, the two texts kind of reconciled with each other with other variants, and we ended up with the Byzantine type after that. So one of the things, as I just kind of tipped my hand a little bit, is that the the Western type of text, which we've already said has great agreement with the Old Syriac, which is a Western type of text. But the Greek Western type of text is filled with Semitic grammar. Matthew Black states that the Semitisms are, quote, a special feature of the text of Codex D. In an extensive study of the occurrence of Semitisms in the Book of Acts, in a book by that title, Semitisms of the Book of Acts, Max Wilcox found something very amazing, something which he viewed as a textual problem, he said, his words. He found that Codex D and the Greek Western type in general was far more replete with Semitisms than any of the other Greek texts. He wrote on page 185 of his book, this was back in 1965 he wrote this book, he wrote, "There is the textual problem of Acts, In this connection, we may recall that in no inconsiderable number of places where the evidence indicates or suggested Semitism, that evidence was not found in all the manuscripts, but was confined to one manuscript or group of manuscripts, frequently D and its allies. And Codex D is the standard Greek example of the Greek Western type of text. So, as we've seen that the Old Latin and the Armenian versions show signs of having been translated from an Aramaic source text of the Western text type, in chapter, well, now I'm reading from, we're going to move to the second part of this handout, same handout, but we move on and it says chapter 4 at the top, or just a 4, because it's from chapter 4 of my book, The Hebrew and Aramaic Origin of the New Testament. And it's titled The Greek Versions. And some of this is material that we've already covered. But I want to move down to the bottom of the page that's got the 4 at the top. And I want to look at, there are many examples that show the difference between the Western and Alexandrian readings reflect differing translations of the original Aramaic. And remember, when I say the original Aramaic, this either oftentimes it would also work for Hebrew, but it could also be that there was a Hebrew and then there was an Aramaic and then there was a Greek. Okay, so Matthew chapter 10 verse 42, where it says that his reward shall not be lost. And you can see in the handout that there's a little slight difference here between the Western and Alexandrian. The Western says, his reward shall not be lost. And the Alexandrian says, his reward he shall not lose, as it also is in the Byzantine type of text. Then if we go to Matthew chapter 11, verse 19b, the underlying Aramaic would be the same. If we look at Matthew chapter 11, verse 19b, where it says, and wisdom is justified by her sons, the Western text type says, and wisdom is justified by her sons. By the way, you may want to look at, make sure you download the handouts and look at them, because in the handouts, we have this in English and in Greek and in Aramaic, so you can see the difference and visually see what looks alike and what doesn't look alike. So the Western text type says, and wisdom is justified by her sons, and the Alexandrian says, and wisdom is justified by her deeds. The Byzantine type does say wisdom is justified by her sons. So the Aramaic word is a word that's read as could be read as b'nai, sons, or as b'nai, deeds, depending on the vowels. But ancient Aramaic was written without vowels. So here, the underlying difference is not a difference in Aramaic. It's only a difference in the Greek. So we can see how the two different Greek readings came from an original Aramaic. Matthew 12:15, and there went after him many men. Now, the Western text type actually says there went after him many multitudes. The Alexandrian says that there went after him many, ambiguous, many, but apparently many men. And the Byzantine text type says there went out after him many multitudes. Again, this is something where the word for men in Aramaic looks very much like the word for multitudes. Okay, Matthew 16:16, and it says, the Son of the God of life. The Western text type says the Son of the God of salvation, but the Alexandrian text type says the Son of the God of life, as does the Byzantine text type. Now the difference is this word life. and or salvation. And the word salvation as such, the word Yeshua, salvation, doesn't actually exist in Aramaic. And so there are two different words, one that means rescue and another that means life. But the word that is used most often in place of salvation, or in place of Yeshua, in the Aramaic New Testament, is the word that literally means life. So this distinction between the Western type and the Alexandrian type is rooted in the Aramaic, and the Western type text is more literal. Well, actually, the Alexandrian, I guess, is more literal. The Western text type is interpretive, but they're both pointing back to the same Aramaic word. Okay, Luke 17:30, in the day that he revealed the Son of Man. So the Western type says, in the day the Son of Man that is revealed, and the Alexandrian says, in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. And all of this goes back to an Aramaic original that can be translated either way. Okay, Mark 14:15, and it's also true in Luke 22:12. It says, an upper room of a certain house, and or a certain large upper room in the Aramaic. The Western has an upper room of a house, and the Alexandrian says a large upper room. And you can see how this looks very much alike. The only, it's Rabata or Deb Beta. And the words for large and the word for house look very much alike in the Aramaic, but not in the Greek at all. Okay, Luke 24:32, the Western text type says, was not our heart veiled? The Alexandrian says, and was not our heart burning? And the difference is one letter in the Aramaic. Burning is spelt with a dalet at the end, yud kuf yud dalet, and heavy is yud kuf yud resh. And in Aramaic, as you can see, it's the last word, the last letter of the last word in the sentence here in the Aramaic. You can see by comparing them that resh and dalet in Hebrew and Aramaic are almost identical. They look very, very similar. So this is a mistranslation. The Old Latin describes their hearts as heavy as well. Okay. Acts chapter 2, verse 47, finding favor. The Western type says finding favor before all the world. The Alexandrian says finding favor before all the people. Now, the difference is, again, one letter in the Aramaic. People is ayin mem aleph, but world is ayin lamed mem aleph. So here the difference between the Western and Alexandrian text type is, in the Aramaic, a difference between one letter in the word. So they look very much alike in Aramaic, but not at all in Greek. Acts chapter 3, verse 14, the Western text type says, the holy and just you irritated, and the Alexandrian says, the holy and just you denied. And you can see by looking up at the Aramaic that in the Aramaic, the words for irritated and denied look very much alike, but they don't look anything alike in the Greek. Okay, that's the, you can skip to the next page in this handout. The bottom of that's just a leftover portion of the of that chapter of the book I was taking this from. And it's the next page, at the top says Appendix 5, Roman numeral 5, additional evidence for chapter 4. And you can see here again, and I'm just going to breeze through this as quickly as possible in the interest of time, and welcome to study these handouts. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 39, the words to go away or to fall. There's a difference between the verb meaning to go away or to fall, and the two verbs mean or look very much alike in Aramaic, but you can see that they don't look alike at all in Greek. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 29, there are two different Greek words that both mean eyes, and they don't look anything alike. But there's only a single Aramaic word for eyes in the two passages. In Mark chapter 1, verse 10, the phrase being opened, in the Western text it says split, and there's a single Aramaic word behind the two Greek words that don't look alike. In Mark 1:40, we have a difference. The Aramaic says, the Western text type says asking. The Alexandrian text type says begging, and the Old Syriac and Peshitta, both in the Aramaic, have a word entreating that could be translated as asking or begging. Mark chapter 2, verse 4, the Western text type says away from the crowd, and the Alexandrian says on account of the crowd. And we can see that in the Aramaic, the difference, the two phrases look very much alike. In fact, they could be the same word. All right. Looking at Mark chapter 3, verse 5, the Western text type where it says deadness, the Alexandrian text type has hardness, and you can see in the Aramaic that the two words look alike in Aramaic, but they don't look alike in Greek at all. In Mark 4:1, we have a difference between people and crowd, and you can see how in the Aramaic men or people and crowd look very much alike. In Mark 6:36, the Western text type has nearby, the Alexandrian has surrounding, and there's a single Aramaic word behind both of them. In Mark 7:2, we have, in the Western text type, it says they condemned. It's omitted in the Alexandrian text type, but the Byzantine text type has they found fault. And in the Aramaic, the Peshitta has and they complained, which could be translated either way. It's omitted in the Old Syriac. Okay, Mark 7:6. The Western type has love. The Alexandrian text type has honor. They don't look alike at all in Greek, but there's a single underlying Aramaic word for honor, actually. Mark 7:19. So we have a word that means the Western text type that says drain or sewer. We have a different word in the Alexandrian text type that means latrine. And in the Peshitta and the Old Syriac, we have words meaning by excretion or to purify that have been translated differently in each of the two text types. In Mark 8:10, we have boundaries or region in the Western text type, but we have a word that just means region in the Alexandrian text type. And in the Peshitta, we have a word that means of the region, and in the Old Syriac, to the hill. You can go over the rest of these yourself. I don't want to just keep reading. I don't want people falling asleep here. I think we've covered enough here to make it very clear that because there's so many more examples here in we're running out of time to keep going over them, where you can see that there are two Greek words where there's a difference between the reading and of the Alexandrian and the Western text type. There are two different Greek words, and then behind those two Greek words, there's either an ambiguous Aramaic word that could have been translated either way, or it's the result of two different Aramaic words that look very much alike. And so either a Greek translator looked at the word wrong, and that created the variance, or the variance emerged somehow within the Aramaic textual tradition. And but the point is that the difference between the Western text type and the Alexandrian and Byzantine text type often points to an Aramaic original, and that oftentimes that Western text type agrees with the Old Syriac and with a more Semitic style of grammar. And that brings us to our second set of handouts, which is a different file. And I'm going to give you just 3 examples of Semitic grammar, of Hebrew and Aramaic grammar. It's actually generically Hebrew and Aramaic grammar on this first one. And where we can see the grammar of the Greek Western text type in Codex D is the bad Greek, awkward Greek, but great Aramaic grammar, and or great Hebrew grammar too, but very awkward in Greek. And then the Greek, Byzantine, and Alexandrian text types have smoothed it out into nice smooth Greek. And to help our case that we've made previously, that the Peshitta is a revision of the Old Syriac towards greater agreement with the Greek, there are some cases, not all of them, but there are some cases where the Peshitta actually agrees with the Greek grammar and has bad Aramaic grammar. All right, let's look at Matthew. First example we have is Matthew chapter 14, verse 9. Okay, so these first examples we're going to look at are an example of this. In Greek, like in English, if I was to have a number of nouns that are governed by the same preposition, I would only have to say the preposition once. So if I was to say, in English, I would just say, I'm going to the bank and the store and the ice cream parlor. But in Hebrew and in Aramaic, I would have to say, in literal English, I am going to the bank and to the store and to the ice cream parlor. I'd have to repeat that preposition every time. And that's very choppy and awkward in English. And it's very choppy and awkward in Greek. But it is required in Hebrew and in Aramaic. Okay, so in the Old Syriac, we see in Matthew 14:9, and because of the oath and because of the guests. And in the Greek Western type text of Codex D, literally translated, and because of the oath and because of the guests. But the Byzantine and Alexandrian Greek has a nice smooth Greek, and because of the oath and the guests. Just like the Peshitta, which was revised to agree with it, has, and because of the oath and the guests, which is very bad Aramaic grammar, it's nice Greek grammar, because the Peshitta is a revision of the Old Syriac towards greater agreement with the Byzantine Greek. Okay, Mark chapter 6, verse 36. To the surrounding fields and to the villages. Now here the Peshitta probably preserves the original reading of the Old Syriac. The only surviving copy of the Old Syriac for this verse only has one object, so it doesn't actually have the second noun. So We don't have a good example of it in the Old Syriac, but the Peshitta here has the nice Aramaic grammar, and Codex D has to the surrounding fields and to the villages. Nice Semitic grammar. The Alexandrian Byzantine Greek texts have smoothed it out to the surrounding fields and villages. Mark chapter 8 verse 31. The Old Syriac and the Peshitta both have by the elders and by the chief priests and by the scribes. And Codex D also has by the elders and by the chief priests and by the scribes. But the Alexandrian and Byzantine type Greek text says by the elders and the chiefs and the scribes, which is nice Greek. And Codex D's Western Greek has a nice choppy, nice Aramaic, but choppy, awkward Greek. Luke chapter 2 verse 34, for fall and for rising in the Old Syriac and the Peshitta. Codex D, the Western Greek text type, literally translates for fall and for rising. The Alexandrian and Byzantine type Greek have for fall and rising. Doesn't repeat the preposition because it's choppy Greek and they smooth it out. Luke chapter 2 verse 52. The Old Syriac says, with God and with the sons of man. Now, I say God here because I'm comparing Aramaic with Greek, and so we have to have some single underline. Elohim is what I would prefer to say, but I want to show that the in a third language English that the Aramaic and the comparing Aramaic and Greek. So I don't want to imply a difference that's not there. So the Old Syriac says with God and with the sons of man. The Codex D Greek Western text type says with God and with man. It doesn't have the sons of man, but that's an Aramaic idiom for man. And the Alexandrian and Byzantine Greek text type just has with God and men. So no repetition of the preposition with in the Peshitta. In the Byzantine text type, and the Peshitta also has with God and men, which again shows us the Peshitta is a revision of the Old Syriac towards greater agreement with the Byzantine text type, and here has nice Greek grammar rather than Aramaic grammar. Okay, so our next page of our handout begins a next type of Semitism. In Greek, as in English, you can say, and sometimes we read often in the Greek New Testament, as we do in Matthew chapter 4, verse 3, and having approached, the tempter said to him. So you have two verbs, the tempter is doing two things, approaching and saying. And so there's this natural way of saying that in Greek. You can say it this way in English too. Having approached, the tempter said to him, blah, blah, blah. Okay. You can't do that in Hebrew. This having approached, comma, the tempter said, you have to have two verb sentences here. And he approached, and he said to him is what you have to do. And that's what we see in the Aramaic of the Old Syriac, and what we see in the, well, let's go to our example here. In the Aramaic says, and approached to him the tempter and said to him, which is nice Aramaic grammar. And the primitive Western, and Hebrew too, by the way, the primitive Western Greek text type of Codex D translates the Aramaic literally, and approached to him, he the tempter, and said to him. This is the way you must say it in Hebrew and in Aramaic. And it's exactly that way in the Greek Western text type. But in the Alexandrian and Byzantine text type, it's and having approached the tempter, said to him. Okay. We are not, we don't even have time for it. We are not going through. One example is not a pattern, but we have a whole list of examples here over and over and over for you in the handout on page 6 of your handouts. Literally dozens of examples that you can look up for yourself where this exact Semitism occurs, and where the Western text type has nice, smooth Aramaic grammar, awkward Greek grammar, and the Byzantine and the Alexandrian Greek text types smooth it out into nice, smooth Greek. Okay, let's move on to our next page of our handout, and this works only for Aramaic, not for Hebrew. In Aramaic, there is essentially no definite article. Now, there's a weak definite article, sort of, but to keep it simple, there's effectively no definite article in Aramaic. And you can imagine what's a definite article. For those that don't know, definite article is the. So in English, you know, we have the store versus a store. The store is a definite article because it's indicating a specific store. Well, you can imagine if you have a language like Aramaic where there is no definite article, you would have to you would end up using relative pronouns like this and that much more often as substitutes and stand-ins for a definite article. So if you couldn't say the cow, you would be prone to say this cow or that cow to make the distinction that you're talking about a specific cow. So in Matthew chapter 15, verse 24, the Old Syriac says the flock, comma, those, which is the way you say it in Aramaic. The flock, those. And the Codex D, Western text type, has extremely awkward Greek, the sheep, comma, those. And the Alexandrian Byzantine type upgrade it to the sheep. And the Peshitta, being revised to agree with the Alexandrian and Byzantine text type, the Peshitta can't say the sheep because there's no definite article, but it just says sheep, the being understood. Okay. Again, great, part of the mountains of evidence that the Peshitta is a revision of the Old Syriac towards agreement with the Greek. Okay, Matthew chapter 15, verse 32. The Old Syriac and the Peshitta have this crowd, or the crowd this, basically, and Codex D has the crowd this, which is very awkward Greek, and the Alexandrian and Byzantine types revise it to the crowd. In Mark chapter 8, verse 2, the Old Syriac and the Peshitta have this crowd, or literally the crowd this, or a crowd this, and Codex D, the Western text type, has the crowd, comma, this, the crowd this crowd. While that is really bizarre Greek, the Alexandrian and the Byzantine Greek text type have the crowd. Mark chapter 10, verse 22, the Old Syriac has this word, and the Peshitta has at this word, so they're almost identical. The Codex D, Western type, has this, the word, while the Alexandrian and Byzantine Greek simply say the word. Luke chapter 17, verse 17, these 10, Codex D in the Old Syriac. Codex D also has these 10, The Alexandrian and Byzantine text type has the 10. Okay, so we can see here that the Greek Western text type is one of the two oldest text types. It is the text type of the oldest versions, particularly the Old Latin and the Old Syriac, which was why it used to be called the Syro-Latin text type. It's clear that and it is much more Semitic in its grammar than it's much more Semitic in its grammar than the Alexandrian and Byzantine text types. Many times awkwardly so, producing barbaric Greek, but very nice Hebrew or Aramaic. Oftentimes expressing literal translations of the Old Syriac Aramaic text, following its Aramaic grammar to a fault. And by fault, I mean to the violation of sensibilities of the Greek speaker and of Greek grammar, producing very awkward grammar. It's very clear that the ancient Alexandrian version then was a smoothing out to the Greek ear of this barbaric Aramaic grammar in the Greek translation into a nice smooth Greek version that's pleasing to the Greek ear. And that in some cases, the Peshitta version, in its being a revision of the Old Syriac towards greater agreement with the Byzantine type Greek text, even on occasion copies the Greek grammar that violates the Aramaic grammar that's found in the Greek Western text type. In other words, the Greek Western text type is more Aramaic in its grammar than the Peshitta on many occasions. Bottom line is that the Greek Western text type is a very important witness to us to the original Aramaic behind the Greek, or the original Hebrew behind the Greek, the original Hebrew and Aramaic behind the Greek of the Greek New Testament. We can see behind the Greek of the Greek Western text type the Aramaic grammar much more clearly than we can see in the Greek Alexandrian and Byzantine text types. And this is very important to us because, as I've said before, one of the things that we are lacking is we only have Old Syriac for the four Gospels. Unfortunately, the rest of the New Testament in the Old Syriac version has been lost to us. And all we have of it is three indirect witnesses. The Peshitta as a revision of the Old Syriac towards greater agreement with the Greek Byzantine type text. The Western Greek text type, which is a literal Greek translation of the Aramaic, and the quotations of the Syriac Aramaic quotations from the post-Gospels portion found in Syriac church fathers who, when they quoted the Gospels, tended to quote the Old Syriac version, and therefore we can project that forward into the post-Gospels portion. And so these three witnesses give us big clues as to the underlying original Hebrew and Aramaic text behind the post-Gospels portion of the New Testament. All right, I know this has been a little bit longer video than some, but we had to cover some pretty technical material here. I need to ask everybody to please consider donating to support these very unique videos. For those that don't know, my wife is disabled. She's chronically ill, suffers from chronic pain. I am her caretaker. So we definitely need your help to maintain survival. You can do that by donating by PayPal to donations at wnae.org, or by clicking on the donate link in the video description. And also, please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel and click that notification bell so you'll get notifications when new videos come out. Let us know what you think of this video in the comments and participate in the discussions in the comments. Share these videos with your friends on social media, in email, in Facebook, on relevant Facebook groups, and on your Facebook page and on Twitter, etc. And until next time, everybody, shalom.